Radio is an intimate storytelling medium, and when it bonds with one of the finest storytellers of our times, the result is sheer magic. During these times of social distancing, All India Radio hopes to bring you some comfort, some connection, with an exclusive story reading series, Bonding over the Radio. Coming up is the pick of the day, voiced by the author Ruskin Bond himself.
I've got a story here. It's one of my grandfather's pets, an unusual one, a chameleon. It's a funny one. Tomorrow I can read something different.
We are all ears, sir. Bring them on.
A chameleon called Henry. This is the story of Henry, our pet chameleon. Chameleons are in a class by themselves and are no ordinary reptiles. They are easily distinguished from their nearest relatives, the lizards, by certain outstanding features. A chameleon's tongue is as long as its body. Its limbs are long and slender, and its fingers and toes resemble a parrot's claws. On its head may be any of several ornaments. Henry had a rigid crest that looked like a fireman's helmet. His eyes were his most remarkable feature. They were not beautiful, but his left eye was quite independent of his right. He could move one eye without disturbing the other. Each eyeball, bulging out of his head, wobbled up and down, backward and forward. This frenzied movement gave Henry a horrible squint, and one look into Henry's frightful gaze was often enough to scare people into believing that chameleons are dangerous and poisonous reptiles. One day grandfather was visiting a friend when he came upon a noisy scene at the garden gate. Men were shouting, hurling stones, brandishing sticks. The cause of the uproar was a chameleon that had been discovered sunning itself on a shrub. Someone claimed that the chameleon could poison people 20 feet away simply by spitting at them. The residents of the area had risen up in arms. Grandfather was just in time to save the chameleon from certain death, and he brought the little reptile home. The chameleon was Henry, and that was how he came to live with us. When I first visited Henry, he would treat me with great caution, sitting perfectly still on his perch with his back to me. The eye nearer to me would move around like the beam of a searchlight until it had me well in focus. Then it would stop, and the other eye would begin an independent survey of its own. For a long time, Henry trusted no one and responded to my friendliest gestures with grave suspicion. Tiring of his wary attitude, I would tickle him gently in the ribs with my finger. This always threw him into a great rage. He would blow himself up to an enormous size as his lungs filled up with air, while his color changed from green to red. He would sit up on his hind legs, swaying from side to side, hoping to overawe me. Opening his mouth very wide, he would let out an angry hiss. But his threatening display went no further. He did not bite. Yes, Henry was a harmless fellow. If I put my finger in his mouth, even during his wildest moments, he would simply wait for me to take it out again. I suppose he could bite. His rigid jaws carried a number of finely pointed teeth, but Henry seemed convinced that his teeth were there for the sole purpose of chewing food, not fingers. He was sometimes willing to take food from my hands. This he did very swiftly. His tongue performed like a boomerang and always came back to him with the food, usually an insect, attached to it. Although Henry didn't care or didn't cause any trouble in our house, he did create somewhat of a riot in the nursery school down the road. It started out quite innocently. When the papayas in our orchard were ripe, Grandmother sent a basket full of them, to her friend, Mrs. Banerjee, who was the principal of the nursery school. While the basket sat waiting, Henry went searching for beetles and slipped in among the papayas, unnoticed. The gardener dutifully carried the basket to the school and left it in Mrs. Banerjee's office. And when Mrs. Banerjee returned, after making her rounds, she began examining and admiring the papayas. And out popped Henry. Mrs. Banerjee screamed. Henry squinted up at her, both eyes revolving furiously. Mrs. Banerjee screamed again. Henry's color changed from green to yellow to red. His mouth opened as though he too would like to scream. An assistant teacher rushed in, took one look at the chameleon, and joined in the shrieking. Henry was terrified. He fled from the office, running down the corridor and into one of the classrooms. There he climbed up on a desk, while children ran in all directions, some to get away from Henry, and others to catch him. Henry finally made his exit through a window and disappeared in the garden. Grandmother heard about the incident from Mrs. Banerjee, but didn't mention that the chameleon was ours. It might have spoiled their friendship. Grandfather and I didn't think Henry would find his way back to us, because the school was 3 blocks away. But a few days later, I found him sunning himself on the garden wall. Although he looked none the worse for his adventure, he never went abroad again, but spent the rest of his days in the garden, where he kept the insect population well within bounds.
Thank you for the gift of laughter.
Oh, thank you. Well,
It must be helping our listeners in these times.
yes.
Sir, can I read a couple of responses that have come on our official Facebook page?
Yes, surely.
Ankita Saha, thanks for broadcasting Mr. Bond's wonderful voice to us. I am Ankita from Kolkata, and I never miss meeting him whenever he comes to Kolkata. I even went to Mussoorie on a Saturday just to meet him. I want to convey a message through All India Radio. Sir, thanks for giving us such an amazing return gift on your birthday month. Happy birthday in advance.
Oh, thank you for remembering.
One more.
Yes.
This is an observation by one Mr. Santanu Roy.
Oh.
I like the anecdote he so warmly narrated yesterday about his maternal grandfather's encounter with the ostrich.
Gotcha.
It was a very good example of incidents which shake us during and immediately after their occurrence, but don't fail to make us laugh when we look back at them. It reminded me of what Jerome K. Jerome wrote in Idle Thoughts of an Idle Fellow about time's way of sweetening memories or preserving just the good bits of it.
Gotcha.
It was pleasantly surprising to find the preface of that book written by Mr. Bond himself.
Great. Thank you for the comments, for the appreciation. And please do keep listening to the stories and read them again too when you get a chance.
That was storyteller par excellence, Ruskin Bond, reading his hand-picked story of the day in our exclusive series, Bonding Over the Radio. Ruskin Bond needs no introduction. Much loved by generations for his enduring and inspiring writing, he's an iconic and prolific literateur, honoured with the Padma Bhushan and Sahitya Akademi Awards. Some of his works that have been adapted for film and television series include Junoon, Susanna's 7 Husbands, Saat Khoon Maaf, The Blue Umbrella, and Ek Tha Rusty. A presentation of the Central English Features Unit. This came to you from the External Services Division of All India Radio.